chapter 4 is really an important chapter because it sets sort of the foundation for everything else that we're going to do. And it really is kind of foundational ideas in economics. So we're going to talk about demand, supply, and equilibrium. And if you've had a class in microeconomics, or you will take one, we won't cover it in as much detail as you do there. This is a class in macroeconomics. We only need some parts of this framework in order to make progress on the macro questions. So if you've had micro before, you'll notice our presentation of this is much less rigorous. But nonetheless, hopefully you still find it interesting. So, I think one of the things that's interesting about this topic is that if you take really any experience you've had in life so far, is that generally speaking, if you want to buy something, you're able to go somewhere online or physically in person and buy that thing. Now, the pandemic has made some of those things a bit more difficult, but this sort of fact that I can get just about anything I want and not have to worry about whether or not it's going to be there is really pretty amazing. So you take something like gas for your car, and you've never pulled up to a gas station and wondered, am I going to be able to get gas? Right? So it's always there, and I'm always confident I can get gas to drive away in my car. Now, what's amazing is that this isn't coordinated at all, right? Nobody tells the gas stations how many people to expect. There's no central coordination. There's a marketplace. There's firms that are willing to supply gas. There's consumers willing to buy it, and we've managed to work this out in such a way that there's always enough gas available whenever we want it. And so that's pretty cool the longer you think about it. And so our goal in this chapter is to understand sort of why that is true and how these markets work. And in some cases, how we can mess that up and make them not work as well. So we've got our usual learning objectives here. And our very first learning objective is to just understand what we mean by a market and the particular version we're going to study, which is called perfect competition. So markets is something you'll hear a lot about from economists and in general in business-related news. And so what exactly is a market? Well, a market is just a group of buyers and sellers of some good or service trading with each other and the market also includes the rules by which they make their exchanges. Right? And so now most of the time the rules are pretty straightforward. So if you go into a grocery store, the rule is whatever you put in your cart and want to leave with, you have to stop and pay for at the cashier. Same thing if you buy something online at Amazon, right? Now there's other types of markets that could work differently. So eBay is a different type of market, right? So there the rule is you bid on a good, and if you happen to have the highest bid, then you get to walk away with it. If somebody else has a higher bid, they walk away with it. That's an example of a market, a group of buyers and sellers trading something, and the rules by which they're going to trade. So a market in that sense is pretty simple, and we see lots of examples in our daily lives. So just take some time and think about where are all the places I've bought something, and how did that market function? And so sometimes you don't actually have to buy anything, right? You could exchange goods with each other. So when you were younger, maybe you traded some type of playing cards with groups of friends. That's a market. There's buyers and sellers trading, and there's rules that go along with how the trades work. Okay, now we're going to study a particular type of market or a particular construct of markets that's referred to as perfect competition. And so, what exactly does that mean? So perfect competition if I want to define it, is, so I should say it occurs when there are a large number of buyers and sellers I should say, if I want to hit all the points here, selling and buying identical products such that the number of buyers and sellers is so large that no one individual can affect the price of the good or service being sold. No one buyer or seller can affect the price. And that might not make a whole lot of sense right now until we've developed some examples of a market and a perfectly competitive market. And then we can kind of think about what would it look like if we didn't have perfect competition. But the main component here of this is that nobody can affect the price, right? So one of the key parts to perfect competition is that if I'm selling it, let's say I'm selling in Apple, right? The idea of perfect competition is that I can't do anything that would influence the price that Apple sell for. So, why is that? Well, if I have an Apple, there's so many other people willing to sell an Apple that no matter what I do, I can't affect the market price for apples. That's what it means to be in perfect competition. So the kind of key part of this definition is that buyers and sellers are price takers. So when I buy the good in a perfectly competitive market, there's nothing I can do to influence the price. Same thing is true on the seller side. Now, it's worth noting is that there's very few actual examples of a perfectly competitive market. Now, the one I used in Apple is one such example, right? So the market for agriculture is one. Right? So if I'm selling corn or carrots, whatever it is, that tends to be a perfectly competitive market. Why? There's lots of sellers, lots of buyers, and it's always an identical product, right? The carrot that I sell, generally speaking, is not going to be any different from the carrot somebody else is selling. And since there's so many of them, there's nothing I can do to affect the price. So I just come to the market. I know I'm going to be able to sell my carrots for whatever the going rate currently is, and the same is true of buyers. Now, if there aren't that many other examples of perfect competition, why are we studying this, right? So for most of you, you didn't take the class because you wanted to learn more about how prices of agricultural goods are determined. So why do we use perfect competition? Is because we can learn a lot about how other markets function by studying the perfect competition case. So perfect competition is easier to study, and the insights we gain here will transfer to the other cases where it doesn't exist. So we're not wasting our time. We're just studying the easiest case first, and that's going to give us insights to the more difficult cases. So that is our markets and perfect competition. In the next video, we will be thinking harder about where demand comes from.